Sarah's on. Oh, I can hear now.
Yeah. Oh, Colonel C can't hear us either.
Okay, so I think we've got Sarah. Sarah, you can hear me?
Sarah, can you hear Alex?
No, I can't hear her.
Okay, we can't.
She needs to get her mic on.
Turn the volume up. It's all the way up.
Okay, I can hear Colonel Sneed.
Sarah talking to him? Yeah, she's on the phone.
No, but can they hear her? Now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear Colonel Sneed?
I can hear Colonel Sneed. Okay, can you call?
So I'm going to hang up the phone?
Yeah, you can hang up the phone.
All right.
I don't know. Go look. I need to look up or something. Okay, thank you. We're about 1 minute past the hour. We've got a full lineup.
Well, then I'll go say her.
Call to
I'm
me.
going to go ahead.
Yeah.
I'll go say sir.
If you can mute when you're not speaking, that'll be great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody. I want to thank everybody for being here today. This is the first time we're doing anything like this at Entergy. We thought it was a good form of communication. We've got a great lineup of guests and some that may be joining. Dealing with technology, always have a little bit of hiccups here and there, but we think this will be a good opportunity to communicate with everybody. My name is Alex Schott. I'm the manager of social media for Entergy, and I'm joined today by Melonie Stewart, who is our customer service director. That's Melonie right there, and I'm also joined by Brian Fitzsimmons, who is the Chief Administrative Assistant in Jefferson Parish in John Young's office. Also joined by Chris Hebert, who is with Impact Weather, and he's somebody that provides Entergy with weather services and forecasts. And then, of course, we've got Lieutenant Colonel Jerry Sneed, with the Deputy Mayor of Public Safety and the Director for the Office of Homeland Security for the City of New Orleans, and also Sarah Babcock, who is with the New Orleans Department of Health. So I want to thank everybody. Everybody hearing me okay? Just give like a little thumbs up. Good. Good. Great. Okay. If you are muted, just a little bit of housekeeping. Just hit the little red. Just make sure your microphone's not red. That means you're muted. And I think we are now joined by Cynthia, Councilmember Cynthia Hedge-Morrell's office. She should be on shortly. And as soon as she is, I will switch over to her camera. Okay, so I'll get started here. We're going to first start with a question for Chris. We'd like to hear a little bit about this hurricane season itself. Can you give us a little overview of what we saw? Any predictions for the rest of the season? And if you could talk briefly about the factors that play into how hurricane tracking is performed and that affects.
All right. Well, so far this season, we've had 9 named storms out there in the Atlantic Basin. 2 of them became hurricanes. That was Umberto and Ingrid, the last 2 storms that developed. At the beginning of the season, which started back on June 1st, all the conditions that we look for, the seasonal forecast parameters that we look at, indicated a very active season across the basin. But as it turned out, it's been somewhat below normal in terms of activity. In fact, significantly below normal in activity, not just across the Atlantic Basin, but all across the tropics. We've had less than normal activity across the Eastern Pacific as well as the Western Pacific this season. Now, season in the Atlantic starts around June 1st, or starts on June 1st and ends November 30th. Typically, the peak of activity occurs around the mid parts of September, around September 10th, about 2 weeks ago. And typically, we'd have just as many storms form after September 10th as before. This year, it looks different out there. We've had conditions throughout the season where it hasn't been that favorable for the storms to form. Even though the water temperatures were very warm as predicted, the sea surface temperatures were quite warm as had been predicted, and all the other parameters that we typically look at were favorable for development. Something is just not right out there. And I've been talking with some of my colleagues over the past week, and we've been discussing why the Atlantic activity has fallen below expectations this year. And we think that for some reason, which we don't understand, the tropics all across the northern hemisphere this season have been dominated by some dry air in the mid-levels. Now, hurricanes develop because of, well, they need warm ocean water, but they need a lot of moisture throughout the atmosphere. Hurricanes can be as high as 10 miles above the ground in terms of their height, and they need warm, moist air throughout that environment for development, and we just aren't seeing that across the tropics this year in the mid-levels. So it's maybe moist at the surface, but it's very dry just above the surface. So we've had some problems with that this year, which has led to the less than normal activity. As far as the rest of the season out there, well, looking at some of the models that just got a new model run just a few minutes ago, not really seeing any projections of any activity for the next 2 weeks out there in the tropics. So it's looking still like it might finish up the season with maybe just another storm or two out there across the Caribbean, maybe the Gulf of Mexico this year. Something could develop. But other than that, I think it's going to wind up with about maybe 10 or 11, maybe 12 named storms by the time the season ends in November. But you have to watch out because these late season storms typically form closer on in, maybe in the western Caribbean Sea, possibly the Gulf of Mexico. We're getting cold fronts reaching the Gulf of Mexico now, so I think that the Texas coast is probably out of the woods, but farther east from Louisiana on to Florida, there's still the potential that something could spin up in the Gulf of Mexico, perhaps the northwestern Caribbean Sea, over the next month and a half, and there still could be a threat, although I think the chances of that happening are somewhat below normal for the rest of the season. Alex, I'm not hearing you. Are your mic muted?
I'm sorry, I was muted. I apologize for that. There was probably a lot of dead air just now. Okay, we're getting better at this. So basically what I was saying was, being that it's National Preparedness Month, I figured that it'd be good to learn a little bit about what local city governments do to prepare for a major storm. What are the best ways area residents can prepare? We know we have to remain vigilant knowing that we're winding down another season, but I figured Colonel Sneed could give us some nice insight onto what the city does.
Yeah, here in New Orleans, we realize our biggest risk, of course, is a hurricane. So that's and unfortunately, hurricane season comes every year, right, from June 1st through the end of November. So what we do is constantly look at our plans, update our plans. We ask our citizens to do the same thing. In the city of New Orleans, there's basically two types of storms we have to worry about. The Category 1 and 2, Tropical Storm 1 and 2, that will not require a mandatory evacuation, and then the Category 3 or higher storm, in which the mayor will ask for a mandatory evacuation. So we have to plan for both of them. For the lesser storm, we have to be prepared for anything. Each storm is different, of course, and you have to be prepared for anything at any time. But the lesser storms, the 1 and 2, basically we ask our citizens to be able to be prepared to take care of themselves, to hunker down in their own homes, to have 3 to 5 days worth of food and water supplies, to have a backup generator possibly. If they don't have a backup generator and we're going to lose electricity, have another means in which to cook food and so forth, such as barbecue pits or something like that, or maybe if they have gas stoves, that's a whole lot better than electrical stove. But be prepared for the loss of power, be able to weather the storm in their homes. We encourage our citizens to have shutters for their homes, prepare in that manner, and just be able to hunker down and be weather the storm, the shorter ones. The Category 3 or higher storm, that's when we have determined that the city of New Orleans, the mayor will ask for a mandatory evacuation of our citizens. In that case, they need to be prepared to leave. When the mayor tells them to leave, they need to heed his warning and evacuate, just like the mayor's asking them to. Look, when we do this, it's not because we think the levee system is going to fail or anything like that. We just realize that a Category 3 or higher storm, there's conditions in which we feel that it's safer for our citizens to evacuate. So if they can evacuate on their own, there's a contraflow plan. We ask our citizens early on to look at the contraflow plan, know how they're going to evacuate, know where they're going to go, know how they're going to get there, and how they're going to notify their loved ones at their home that they're safe out of harm's way when they do evacuate. You need to prepare their vehicles, get it ready to go, and just be prepared in the case we ask for the evacuation. For those citizens that do not have a means to get out, we have what we call our City Assisted Evacuation Plan, where we ask our citizens to prepare early on. They need to call us at 311 and let us know that they need assistance. We'll tell them where one of the pickup points are. We have 17 pickup point locations throughout the city, and at some point the mayor will tell them to start moving to one of those pickup points. RTA will pick them up, bring them to a set location, and where state will have state buses for us, and we'll actually either bring them out coach buses or possibly airplanes to get them out of harm's way. Again, we tell our citizens, don't disobey the mayor's warnings. When he says a mandatory evacuation, they should do that, because at some point we will go into our curfew, and if any citizen decides to stay, there will be a curfew. They will not be able to leave their premises of their home or their property, and we'll have active patrols with police and National Guard patrolling the area to ensure that those citizens that have left, that their property is taken care of. So we ask our citizens to heed his warning. We also tell a citizen, if they decide not to listen to the mayor's evacuation, at some point they're going to accept full responsibility of that. And I know people have generators and they have backup water and all those type of things, but at some point we, our first responders, cannot get out to help them. So say a tree goes down, crashes through their roof, traps one of their loved ones underneath, and maybe sever an artery or something like that. We cannot send our public safety people out because the winds are too high, so it's unsafe for us. So they're going to accept full responsibility for that. So again, we're not trying to threaten our citizens. We're not trying to scare them needlessly. But if we ask for a mandatory evacuation, we would hope our citizens listen to us. We're not going to ask for one if we don't have to. I'm too old and too tired to be asking for a mandatory evacuation and go through all that work if we don't need to. But we have a system in place to get anybody out, those that need help, those that can drive out on their own. And we also have a system in which we get our citizens back quickly. Because a lot of people say, if I leave, you're not going to let me back. No, we learned from Katrina, one of the best ways to help our city get back up and running is to get our citizens back in place, in home, as quickly as possible. So we're going to get them back as quickly as possible. So again, we ask our citizens to be prepared for the smaller storm where they hunker in place, be prepared and listen to the mayor if he asks for a mandatory evacuation. After every event, we do an after-action review to see what we did right, what we did wrong. I think Isaac, the biggest thing about Isaac is we kind of let our guard down. We thought it was going to be a little minor thing, and it caused us actually, in some ways, more trouble than some of the bigger storms. So we need to actually look at our whole plan and ensure that we're better prepared for even the minor ones. This year, one of the things we learned from last year, we lost electricity at our police stations and our fire stations. This year we have a generator in all those police and fire stations so that our first responders can have electricity and be ready to take care of themselves better also. So we're always looking at our plans, always seeing how we can do things better. We ask our citizens to do the same thing and trust us. And if we ask for the evacuation, do that, and then we work together to ensure the city's safe.
Thank you. It's great information, especially to have when in periods of quiet weather systems. I figure it's easier to communicate what the city does and what Entergy does. Before I continue, I want to mention that people can ask questions. Anybody that's watching at home or on their computer, they can submit a question to Storm Hangout using the hashtag on Twitter. We have somebody monitoring the feed. We're getting some questions in already. And I also want to welcome Councilmember Cynthia Hedge-Morrell for joining us. She is, and this is being broadcast all over the place, all over the world, so I'll give an understanding of our guest is New Orleans City Council member for District D and also the Utility Committee Chair. So definitely thank you for joining us here on our little experiment with Google Hangout and technology.
Thank you.
So basically, we got the city's perspective from Colonel Sneed. I'd like to get a little bit from Melonie and Brian from their perspective, from a parish perspective, as well as from Entergy's perspective on how they prepare, what goes into the planning process, the drilling for this type of a hurricane of a Category 1 or 2. Can you give us a little bit of background on that?
Yeah, over in Jefferson Parish, I mean, we have the emergency operations plan. It's a very thick document that covers everything from our animal shelters to public works to Grand Isle, for exactly what we're going to do from 5 days out of landfall to a storm to an actual storm hitting. And the process is very clear and defined. How Public Works, for instance, deploys assets early to secure construction sites, clean out sewer drains, simple things like that, 5 days out, to making sure sandbags are ready when we're, perhaps less than 72 hours out. We also have the mandatory evacuation for Category 3 and above, where we will do a public assisted evacuation, and our pickup points are at the major lines on Jefferson Parish bus lines. All you have to do is get to Veterans Avenue, for instance, on the east bank, or La Palco on the west bank, and a bus will pick you up, bring you to the evacuation site on the west bank. The Ilario Center on the east bank is the Yenny building, and we will get you logged, get your critical information, and put you on a bus to an evacuation site, and then bring you back after the storm when it is safe to return. In preparation for storms for business and people, we have re-entry placards. We try to get, just like Colonel Sneed said, to get the city back running after a storm, you need your people to come back, you need your businesses to come back. We have a placard re-entry system where it's tiered. So for instance, a tiered 1 business would be something of immediate need to a recovery effort, like fuel. A business having something to do with providing fuel to trucks or generators or whatever. And then it goes on down to Tier 3 and Tier 4 for allowing regular residents to come back in during a recovery process. But the Jefferson Parish Emergency Operations Plan and PREP is very thorough, very clearly defined, again, starting 5 days out from the potential of a storm coming in. And we're always prepping. We run a minimum of 2 drills a year in our Emergency Operations Center, where we completely mobilize the Emergency Operations Center, run a drill. We have people call in with different situations, evacuating a nursing home, evacuating an assisted living center, no power at an assisted living center. For instance, if it's a Category 1 or Category 2 where there's not an evacuation, but we need to take care of that situation. So we're constantly running through those scenarios, trying to improve and make them better. We did an after action for Hurricane Isaac, similar to what Colonel Sneed mentioned, and lots of lessons learned have been incorporated since then. Unfortunately, every storm the last 10 years has seemed to be quite different. We're learning as we go, and we're doing the best we can. We're partnering with Entergy to the maximum extent possible to set priorities for the public for getting power back on, and to set the expectation. What can you expect at the approach of a tropical storm for power loss or power continuity, for that matter, all the way up through a Category 3 storm? So setting the expectation will help the public be prepared, which will help the whole situation for Entergy, for Jefferson Parish, for Orleans Parish. It's a good relationship.
And I'll chime in on that. In looking at storms historically over the past 10 to 15 years, we found that there's a certain amount of time that it usually takes us to get the majority of the customers back on. And so for a Category 1, we want to make sure that the community knows that it may take up to about 7 days to get your power back on. So that's the majority of the customers, about 90% of the customers, back in 7 days. For a Category 2, that's up to 10 days, and for a Category 3, up to 14 days. So as Brian and as Colonel Sneed mentioned, we want to make sure that the community is ready, if they are going to shelter in place, for those types of time frames, to be without power for up to 7 days for a Category 1.
And on that note, getting the perspective from the City Council in terms of what they've seen as best practices for preparing for a storm, and some historically, tips given to residents. What are some of the best ideas and tips for people preparing for a hurricane?
I think, are you referring that to me?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay. What I find is that in many cases, citizens have to realize that if they hunker in place, that the count starts after the storm. And so what happened with Isaac was that people remained in place and they thought it would take 3 to 7 days, but they didn't realize it was 3 to 7 days after the storm, because energy can't come out until the wind goes down to a certain level. And I think it's 35 miles. I'm not sure. Melonie, you can maybe correct me there. I think the other thing for us as a city council is that in New Orleans, we did a public-private partnership, and we now have evacu spots. So these are public art. It looks like someone standing at a bus stop with their hand up, and it's in key locations around the city. So residents that don't have the ability to evacuate themselves, they can go to these spots and bus transportation will be provided for them. So that's a lesson learned from Katrina, that we had about 30,000 people who were in the city that did not have a means of evacuation. And so going forward now, we can evacuate the entire city once we do a mandatory evacuation. I think we talk about things that people can do around their home to make sure that they put things away, make sure that they storm-proof their outsides, and that's going to help energy because you don't have flying debris, you don't have flying tables, you don't have flying things that can damage poles, and also looking at your trees. Energy has a good policy where we go around throughout the year trimming trees, but because of our thick canopy of trees, oak trees particularly, it's a problem. And so what we do is we ask people to check the trees, and if you see that there are errant limbs that are hanging around your trees or around your transformers, you have to notify Energy so they can come out prior to the storm season and take care of that. So that's just some of the things that, from a council perspective. We also, I know we do a newsletter, and when we send our newsletter out to our constituents, we always put references to the websites and to the information that Energy has, that the city has, so that they can keep up to the minute on what are best practices going forward.
Yeah, I think with crisis communications today, technology has made it so easy to keep people informed, and I think that one of the things that we saw during ISID, especially on social media, was related to special needs residents. And so I'd like to get Sarah's input on how special needs residents can best prepare for a storm. It's a very large community in the city and in the area itself, so I think that we'd be interested to hear about your experiences there.
Thanks, Alex. The health department in New Orleans is responsible for making sure that vulnerable populations have what they need during an emergency, whether that's evacuation assistance or help sheltering in place and running medical special needs shelters during an emergency. And so we really want anyone who has a medical or mobility need to notify us that they are in our community and are going to need assistance. So we ask that everyone call 311 and ask to be signed up on the special needs registry. So this is a list of people who may not be able to walk to an evacu spot. They may be on dialysis, they may have medical equipment in their home that requires electricity, and so we need to know where you live, and we'll ask you a lot of questions about your mobility and your medical needs so that we can determine the right type of transportation for you and the right type of sheltering for you. We also work with nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and a lot of the senior facilities to make sure that those facilities have a plan for evacuation, or that residents are prepared to do that by themselves. And most of the seniors are not going to be fortunate enough to watch things like Google Hangouts, so we ask that everyone watching check in on your grandparents, your elderly neighbors, other citizens from your church who who don't use types of social media and the internet to explain to them how they can call and register for the special needs registry and get other assistance from the city.
And if I could chime in Jefferson Parish, we don't have 311. We have an online. If any of the public goes to jeffparish.net and clicks on the hurricane preparedness banner for our special needs in particular, we ask families and special needs people to register online. It's a simple form that you fill out, lets us know where you are, who you are, what your need is, and we collect that data continually so that in the event, if an event happens, we know where you are, where we need to go to get you in advance. It's very similar to 311. It's just done online. But our hurricane banner on jeffparish.net is a wealth of information for Jefferson Parish residents to all. Even links to Entergy's website are there to help the residents out.
Yeah, and in the spirit of the Google Hangout, I just want to say, if anybody wants to chime in at any time, don't feel like it's like a formal. It's completely open and informal. So the beauty of it is, if you could see on the screen, everybody can see the faces, and it's kind of like a dinner party or something. So certainly.
Let me just add one more thing. I think that one of the things that we found after Katrina that was very helpful was that we asked the churches to check on the elderly. And the other thing that we found was very helpful once the city people started coming back was to direct them to the libraries, because every library, and we have restored every district in our city has a main library or a library that's been restored. And there are computer labs at those libraries. For those people that don't have internet access at home or don't have access to a computer, they can go to any one of the neighborhood libraries. And as I said, there are 5 districts, and there's a library in every district. And then we have the main library on Loyola. And they can register online, and they can also look at all of the information that all of the other people online in this group have talked about. So it's something that you have to think about. You have to think about the ones that don't have access to the internet.
Right, absolutely. I think Colonel Sneed mentioned the generators, and I think that we've seen more and more people starting to use generators and plan for outage situations where they can provide power to themselves through generators. And so I guess safety's been a major concern and focus. Maybe anybody can chime in and talk about their experience, either tips on generator safety or some best practices or worst practices that you've seen with experience what people have with generators. I don't know. Anybody can.
Worst practice.
I'd like to do that. Several years ago, I went ahead and for my home, being an emergency manager, I thought maybe I ought to have an emergency a generator for my home. They're not inexpensive, but I was able to bite the bullet and get one. And for Isaac, my wife says, who wasn't in favor of the generator initially, when she saw how much I had to pay for it, all of a sudden it was a great idea that she was glad she came up with for Isaac. So if the best way, of course, for the generator is if the whole house is taken care of in the generator. Again, in my case, it's a natural gas, so I ensure that it stays running. I don't have to refuel it. But most people have the smaller generators, which again, it works, but they make sure don't put that generator in the garage and close it up, or else you're going to have some carbon monoxide problem. But to have it in a well-ventilated area where maybe all you're keeping on is a couple of key things, such as your refrigerator or something like that. So again, generators are good. They're very, very needed, but make sure that you don't cause another safety factor by having it in the wrong place or not ventilated correctly, and then causing more damage. So, and again, refueling is very, very difficult. I've seen people try to refuel it while it's still running, and of course spill fuel all over, and now you've got a major fire on your hand and maybe an explosion that hurts you. So again, it's a good, the safety tips of generators. Everyone you buy has things written on them, what to do and don't. Watch it closely, read those things prior to the event, and know what you're going to do with the generator. But again, it's a great tool, and it can help you tremendously if you have the right ones.
And I'd just like to chime in. We have on our on the Entergy Storm Center website, there's a section on that website about generator safety that customers may want to refer to if they're thinking about using a generator. And not necessarily a whole house generator, but the smaller ones that do require some fuel, that do have the carbon monoxide emissions that you want to be careful with. It also talks a little bit about plugging things directly into the generator instead of plugging the generator into your main panel. So a great reference in case customers are thinking about doing that, just some safety items to consider.
Melonie, that's a great idea because one of the things that happens with generators is that people who try to plug them into the panel, you might have a 220, and then you have another big problem. I think the other thing is that some people, when they get the generators, they don't realize that the capacity is not going to be for full house.
That's right.
You're only going to be able to do one or two things. My advice has always been when talking at neighborhood meetings to tell them your generator needs to be on the outside, you know, under a carport or under a porch or something like that, so that you know that it is not going into the air system in your house. Because I think after Katrina, I remember we just had a number of problems with people that were coming back to do work on their houses and using generators, and because of, we hadn't reconnected certain parts of the city, and that was really something to worry about.
Yep, so when you get a generator, a long extension cord is usually a good idea. So when you put that generator on the outside of the house, you can run that extension cord in the house and kind of rotate it around, and for your fans, your lights, or maybe even your refrigerator.
Can I just also mention that when we work with a lot of nursing homes, assisted living, and independent living facilities, even though some of those facilities do have generators, they also do not run everything. And so most of the time those facilities are not going to have air conditioning. And so if you have power but you have friends or family who are living in a nursing home, and you may want to go get those individuals and take them back to your house, because those people are also going to be without air conditioning during that time.
Good advice.
Speaking of nursing homes, it brings up a thought for me, and that is that, after a storm, a lot of times we're asked, what type of priorities do you use? How do you determine what customers are going to come on first, what customers are going to come on next? And so nursing homes and hospitals and those types of facilities are very critical to the health and safety of the community, as well as the sewer lift stations, pumping stations, fire and police, and communications. So immediately following a storm, when we're assessing the damage, just like when you walk outside after a storm, look around your home to see what's wrong, if your roof's okay, if a tree has fallen on something, we do the same thing. We're assessing damage, and we're also getting those critical customers back in service. And for us, critical is really something that we work with the parish and the city to determine what's the most important thing to this area in order to have for the health and safety of the community. And so really in the first 3 days following a storm, those are the types of facilities that we're working to restore. Excellent.
In the spirit of social media, we've received a few questions through our Twitter hashtag, and so I'll go ahead and at the halfway point here, we'll start to engage with audience as well as keep the conversation going. The first one is actually for Chris. This is the question is: this year seems to have been quieter than usual in terms of hurricanes. Does this mean anything for this season as well as next season, or what are some of the I guess theories there?
Well, it doesn't mean anything as far as next season. Next season could be extremely active or not. It's hard to tell this far out. Actually, obviously it's hard to tell this season as we got into it, because it turned out to be a lot less active than we thought. The reasons we're not sure of. I've been talking to a large group of researchers and fellow scientists over the weeks, And we're still trying to figure out just why the season turned out so quiet. All the things we look at to predict hurricane activity for the season turned out just as we forecast. Trouble is the hurricanes didn't cooperate. Well, that's good news for everybody along the Gulf Coast, but it's bad news in terms of forecasting hurricanes, because if we don't know what caused the lack of activity this season, it's going to be hard to forecast what's going to happen next season. I'd like to also say there's been some talk today so far about hurricanes and categories. You have to be very careful judging a hurricane by its category. Hurricane Ike hit the Houston-Galveston area back in 2008. That's a Category 2. A Category 2 hurricane could produce a bigger surge into New Orleans than Katrina did back in 2005. It all depends on how it hits the area. Isaac hit from the worst possible angle last year, coming from the southeast right towards the mouth of the Mississippi River. A Category 2 hurricane the size of Ike would produce more flooding in New Orleans than Katrina did. So don't judge a hurricane by its category. You have to look at the size of the wind field. That's what determines the size of the storm surge.
Very good. Our next question, this is for basically anybody that wants to take it. I think everybody would have insight on this one. This is, if I evacuate, what resources do you have so that I know the status of my home, the status of city services, I guess quality of life, etc.?
I can try to tackle that one. That's one of the things we learned from Gustav. When we do ask for evacuation and our citizens leave, you see the local, or you see the media, but you kind of want to know where your area is, what's going on. So what we try to do is talk with the shelters, give them as much information as we possibly can so that they can understand. And then another thing we started this last year or so was Twitter. We found out that social media is a great way to get information out there. So we actually have a Twitter account. No, I don't personally Twitter. I don't understand any of that, but we have a team that does that, and we found out that we use that to try to get to the individual areas, to try to help people understand what the whole city looks like or what their general area looks like. And then one thing with Twittering also, we try to monitor it to where if we see false information on Twitter, that we can actually tell them, no, that's not what's going on. And again, I hope our citizens trust us and believe in us, because what we're trying to do is ensure accurate information. And one of the things we learned from Katrina was sometimes you hear on the radio what's going on. They call in and 20 people are killed on Canal Street, and all of a sudden that's gospel when it's not true. So we have to be able to manage expectations, let our people know really what's going on. So we try to get information out to our citizens, let them know what's going on, but we realize that's a very, very difficult thing to do, and people want to know exactly what's in their area, what their home looks like, and it's impossible to do it by home, but we try to do the best we can getting information out, accurate information, so our citizens know what's going on.
And in Jefferson Parish, we don't have Twitter. We're working on getting Twitter. But we have JP alerts, and any community association that I go to talk to, or John Young will go talk to, he'll ask the citizens to please, again, go to jeffparish.net and sign up for JP alerts, which is, it's a Twitter-like thing. It's only one way. It's us giving information to the community. Now, getting down to the neighborhood levels, extremely difficult. We're not that refined yet, but we're working on it, and hopefully by adding Twitter, that'll get us one step closer to getting more thorough information to the public. But we ask all the citizens of Jefferson Parish to please sign up for JP alerts. With your text, you can send you text, emails, whichever one you like, to give you any information that we have.
In New Orleans, we also have an alert system that you can sign up for.
NOLA Ready.
Yeah, I think it's NOLA Ready, and you can go online and sign up for it.
Yeah, you go to ready.nola.gov.
So I think that's really good moving forward.
And from an Entergy perspective, or from a power perspective, we have our Storm Center website, and so you can go to entergystormcenter.com, and you can look at the status of the power in your neighborhood. You can type in your address. It'll drop a push pin in the location of your address, and you can look to see if the power is back on. Now, I know that in the first couple of days following a storm, it's that red and green map that you may remember from Isaac. It's a little bit difficult to look at, so we've improved that, and we now have an alert box that comes up, and by neighborhood and by parish, we provide information. So, for example, if certain hospitals now have power, we'll be able to post that kind of information out there. If certain subdivisions have, you know, a 50% power or 100% power, we'll be able to post that. We'll also provide information about where the crews are focused next. So again, in the first 3 days of the storm, you'll mainly see information around the critical infrastructure that's coming back online, but following that, we'll provide more neighborhood level information. And that again is at entergystormcenter.com.
Yeah, I think one thing that I saw during the storm was using social media to get the most localized information. So I think that going forward, obviously, we've made a lot of improvements to the outage maps to help keep people informed. Obviously, they want to know what's going on their particular block. The next question I kind of had was, it was actually one that we answered a little bit. It was about how social media plays a role in storm preparation and communication. I think most people chimed in on the Twitter, how important Twitter is, and how keeping customers or residents informed that way. One of the other questions is about how is a mandatory evacuation really mandatory?
Yes, it's really mandatory. But mandatory doesn't mean we're going to go into the homes and pull you out. That's a forced evacuation. So mandatory is the mayor, the parish presidents tell you to leave, you should heed their warnings. If you don't, then you accept full responsibility for not listening to them and making a mandatory evacuation. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. The next question is geared towards, I think it's more for Melonie. It's, I understand not burying power lines, but what is being done to make them more storm resistant?
Well, we've done a couple of things to help with the overhead power line situation. And it's really part of an overall maintenance plan that we've had in place for many years, but are continuing to work that plan as well as harden the system. So a couple of things that we do is inspect and replace poles on a given cycle. And as Councilmember Morrell mentioned earlier, we also trim trees on a regular cycle. So if you see something that looks, you know, unusual or problems, you know, we encourage you to give us a call and let us know what you're seeing. So we look at our trees, we ensure that the trees are cut, and we also have improved the durability, or I guess the size of our poles. So certain poles are rated for certain loads and wind speeds, and so we have increased the rating on those poles and put stronger poles in so that they are more storm resistant. So those are just some of the things that we do on a routine basis, as well as what we've done in recent years.
And so, as part of, if people see, I guess, overgrown tree limbs and any kind of things that might bring them concern, there's a dedicated resource or a phone number for them to call.
Well, it's our common number. It's the 1-800-ENTERGY line. And so we encourage customers, if they see something that is a concern for them, to please give us a call. So while we do trimming on trees on a routine basis every 3 to 5 years, depending on where the trees are located, we also have crews that we call our hotspot crews that go out and check on issues that are brought to our attention from the community. So we appreciate, you know, their input. We want them to look for things that are of a concern, and we do have hotspot crews that go out and check on the things that are brought to our attention.
Great, thanks. One other question that came in is regarding Are there assisted evacuation options available for those with special needs?
Yes, there are. So in Orleans Parish, we have the special needs registry. So if you cannot get yourself to an evacu spot and don't have your own transportation, you can call 311, or you can go to ready.nola.gov, and you'll enter some information, and then we'll actually have someone from the health department call you back, get more information, and we will maintain contact with you all year, because that list is actually for more than just hurricanes. We use it when there are other incidents, when there are water boils or other health-related events that may impact your needs. And I know that in Jefferson Parish, they have a similar system as well.
Yeah, Jefferson Parish has a similar system. Again, not 311. You call the Emergency Operations Center if you want to do it by phone at 346-5360, or the website and do your registration, and we'll make sure that special needs are taken care of.
Great. Just a time check, we've got about, I want to say, 10 minutes left, and we've got a few more questions. This one is regarding how do the parishes work together with the state to implement contraflow, and when is contraflow implemented?
Colonel Sneed, that's definitely your question.
Yeah, I can handle that one. You know, we've talked about the Orleans plan, the Jefferson plan. I think that the important thing to understand is we have a regional plan. Everything is tied in together in order to allow all of us to be able to succeed. We understand the lower-lying parishes, they have to be able to evacuate early. So our plan is at 50 hours out from tropical force winds reaching the coastline, the lower parishes start evacuating. So bottom of St. Bernard and Plaquemines, they start moving out. At 40 hours out, our west bankers of Orleans and Jefferson start moving out. And at 30 hours is when the mandatory evacuation goes into effect for Orleans and Jefferson Parish on the east side of the river. Contraflow starts at that 30 hours out. Contraflow plan has been worked, been tweaked, been relooked at, and again, after every event, we do after actions with the state of how to better make contraflow. So we work with them, ensuring that contraflow works to our advantage and helps us. So when contraflow goes into effect, we've all talked about it, we know what's going on, and we, the state, assists us ensuring that our citizens are going the right directions. Now, contraflow plan works very, very well, but it's very, very slow. It does not mean you're going to get there very quickly, but it's a well thought out plan. At 30 hours, almost all roads leading into the city are now leading out of the city. We encourage our citizens that are going to use the contraflow plan, get those maps early on, look at them, and on a Sunday afternoon when the Saints aren't playing or when they, after the Saints game, go out there and figure out how contraflow works for you so you can ensure you're in the right lane. Because if you're in the wrong lane, you think you're headed to West Louisiana, you may be headed to North Louisiana if you're on the wrong lane of contraflow. So it works, but getting prepared prior to will make it work even better for you. So we work closely with the state, and again, we're very, very comfortable with contraflow and how it works, but don't think you're going to be getting anywhere at 60 miles an hour. It's a slow, steady ride.
Great. The next question is a little on the lighter side. It's I think it's geared towards Chris. Who makes up the names for the hurricanes?
Well, the hurricane names are decided by a meeting of the World Meteorological Organization each year, and every time a name is retired, a name can be retired if it causes significant damage, and a country that it gets hit by it determines that they'd like to retire that name. But when the body meets every year, they determine what the name is going to be, and it's picked from a list that represents all the different countries, from the United States to Mexico, France, Spain. So that's why some of the names are not necessarily United States names.
Well, did we retire Katrina?
Katrina is retired, yes, and Rita is retired, and Isaac is retired.
Wow.
Good. Good.
I want to make sure before time runs out to give everybody a chance on the call to kind of talk about the educational resources that are available to the public, not only with the city and local government, but also with Impact Weather, some good weather resources to help better inform people on on planning and monitoring. Everybody likes to monitor the Gulf and the tropics now using different apps and everything. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of any kind of apps that the city has or Entergy has, and make sure everybody's aware of them and how they can get them.
I'll say Jefferson Parish is working on getting an app. We do not have one right now. We anticipate one in 2014.
I'm not sure if the city of New Orleans, Colonel Sneed,
Yeah.
I don't think we have an app.
Yeah, New Orleans does not have an app, but as far as weather, there's a lot of them out there. The problem with these apps, in my view, is sometimes people pick the ones that best show that the storm is not going to hit them. So there's a bunch of them out there. Look at them carefully, and in fact, use them all. Look at all of them. But remember, predictions are not perfect, and don't get into the false pretense of let me pick the one that looks the best for me, and it's not coming towards me, so therefore I don't have to worry. Look at all of them, and then listen to your local weather people and emergency managers as to what you have to do, and listen to us instead of finding the app you like and pay attention to that.
I'd like to.
New Orleans does have the Twitter account, like we've talked about. We are on Facebook, and we do have emergency alerts that go out, and you can sign up for all of those at ready.nola.gov.
I'd like to mention a great app. I do a lot of hurricane preparation presentations each spring, and the best one that I've found is actually from Louisiana. It's called, I don't think you can see this, it's called Get a Game Plan. If you do a search for that, I know it's for iTunes and the iDevices. Get a Game Plan is a great source of information about preparing your family, your home, how to stay informed, evacuation zones, evacuation routes, an area for entering the phone numbers of people you might need to contact or organizations you might need to contact. I think it's one of the best apps out there. It's called Get a Game Plan.
And Alex, while Entergy doesn't have a weather app necessarily, we do have the Entergy app that provides information about safety and information about restoration procedures, just the status of the restoration. So it's good to get that loaded on your phone. It's one less thing you have to think about when you're trying to prep for a storm.
Yeah, I know the Entergy app is actually going through a small upgrade right now, so if you don't have it yet, make sure you download it. It's for both iPhone and Android devices. During the storms, we're able to update in real time the newsroom section, so I think that's a important tool for people, especially considering that when the power is out or you're evacuating, your mobile device is your kind of your lifeline to news. So we're just about out of time. I want to take a moment to thank everybody. This is the first time Entergy's done something like this. I'm shocked how well it's gone, just because I know how technology can be kind of a pain. So hopefully everybody on the other end experienced the same opportunity to kind of see this new way of communicating amongst each other. We hope to do more of these with different topics, and this will also be captured and recorded and saved on our YouTube channels, because I think the information that we got today is extremely useful, and it can be played back in the event that we have to go into a storm mode or something like that. So once again, I thank everybody for joining us. If there's any closing comments, feel free to chime in. But once again, hopefully we can do this again soon in the future.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.